You're listening to the 40 Fit Radio podcast, dedicated to the 40-plus community. Join us as we discuss the truth about fitness and health using science, reason, and the experiences of our host and content experts. Welcome to the 40 Fit Nation.
Hey guys, welcome back to 40 Fit Radio. This is your host, Coach Trent, and Coach Darren Deaton alongside of the table with me.
Morning.
Welcome back to another episode. So today we're going to take a little break from the back pain series, and we're going to talk about competition and the value thereof. Darren, you want to get us rolling?
Welcome to the 40 Fit Nation, everybody. Good wake up this morning. It's early. We're recording early in the morning, so we are waking up ourselves.
Pounding the coffee.
So, yes, I'm on my second and third cups. So, so this morning we're going to talk a little bit about the value of competition and what competition brings to the average individual. And I'm not talking about the lady or guy who is an elite athlete, or I'm just talking about the everyday Joe or Susie who's out there who likes to train and who likes to work out and wants to use some form of athleticism or competition as a way to improve their quality of life. And that's really the way I view it. As a 40 Fit member, our goal is to create sustainability and to create a training program and a lifestyle quality that is sustainable. But I also recognize that we have individuals out there in our listening audience that are all across the spectrum of athleticism or athletic ability. So if individuals that would never think about competing, unfortunately, because I think anyone can compete, whether you're an advanced or beginner athlete or individual lifter, triathlete, marathoner, whatever you do, whatever your sport is, anyone can compete. And then secondly, I think it's important for us to use the value of competition and all of the things that it does for us that are probably things that we don't see as a direct correlation. When we think about competing, we think about preparation and then going to an event and trying to win the event. That's the goal. One of the reasons why I got Trent and I thinking about this subject was I competed this last weekend in a strength meet, a USSF strength meet, and Trent has competed in several strength meets, and I told my wife, I said, darn it, man, there's a guy that's ahead of me in the nation, in my age group, in my weight class. And she was like, honey, it's not all about winning. And I was like, of course it is.
Air contraire.
I said, of course it's about winning.
Yeah.
But she's right. It's not all about winning. I'm a better lifter. I'm a better trainee to my coach by going through that refining process and sitting under that process. So we're going to talk about several points that relate to several things that come out of the value of competition. And the first of those is, and Trent was the one that brought this up, and I think this was great insight on his point, was having a competitive event. So let's clarify this first. The competitive event may not be a strength meet. That's one form of competition. It could be a strength meet. It could be like an endurance event. So it could be a marathon or a 5K or a 10K or a half marathon, a triathlon, a duathlon, a biathlon. It could be
ultra marathon across the Sahara Desert.
Yes, it could be an ultra marathon. It could be a CrossFit competition. It could be tennis, it could be golf, it could be really any athletic endeavor where you're using your body and mind and showing some of that athletic prowess. And so it could be any one of those events or a combination thereof. And so, but preparing to do the hard is one of the values of competition and getting ready for a competition. It gives us a reason. And one of the things you, Trent, you said in the gym the other day was when things get hard, having a goal out there, having a competition out in front of you out there, it makes you stay the course.
Yeah.
It makes you go ahead and get that training session in or do something that's really hard.
That's right.
And so,
Yeah, I mean, we know. I think it's particularly true for strength sports because the bar is the bar is what the bar is. Whatever's on the bar that doesn't change. If you can't lift it one day, then that's you that have changed, not the bar. And so you get punished by not being consistent in the gym and missing training sessions.
Sure.
And so having that competition out on the horizon can help you organize and push through those days where you're like, man, I really don't want to be here.
Yeah.
And we all have that. Like everybody's going to have those days,
yeah.
Sometimes you have a lot of them in a row and you just have to push through that part. But having something out there on the horizon, I find helps me keep focused on why I'm doing what I'm doing and realizing that, hey, this is a logical process. If I skip this step, then I just took, I don't know, I kind of play games with myself. I just took 5 pounds off my total, or I just took a few seconds off my time, or, I added a few seconds to my time in this run just because I missed this training session, or if I think I'm going to miss it, or if I want to skip it.
Yeah.
It's a powerful motivator.
Yeah, I really think it gives us a reason to go into the gym, and it also I think when we talk about the concept of voluntary hardship and the concept of just doing things because they need to be done.
Right.
And the things in themselves and the work in themselves, the work itself brings value whether or not there is an outcome or whether or not there is a reward for that process. But I think also in that process, doing the hard, that it is rewarding to have something out there on the horizon that you're shooting for, that you're working for, at whatever level of advancement you are as a 40-foot member, wherever you are in that process. It really doesn't matter.
Right.
Whether you're a beginning endurance athlete or a beginning lifter or a beginning CrossFitter or whatever sport you're in or athletic endeavor you have, it really doesn't matter. The goal is that it is going to get hard, and usually the closer you get to reaching your goal, the harder it gets. I mean, I know that at the end of an LP, a linear progression, or the novice linear progression, you expect things to get easier. No, that's inverse. There's an inverse relationship there. Your habits might get better. You might get better at coming in the gym and knowing what to do, and your form dials in and all those things. But really, the reality is it gets harder as it gets heavier.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think you experienced that in the run up to getting ready for the strength meet. So you were
crushing last
running
2
through
weeks.
basically a heavy, light, medium program. So you were making you were basically setting a 5-rep PR once a week on your heavy day. And I think you probably got to like about 365, 370, and you're like, man, I don't know if I have any more left in the tank. But you stuck with it, and you rode it all the way up to 380.
385.
385, yeah, 385. And then finally you got through that hardest part, and then you start to taper, just kind of rest a little bit, get taper off some of that fatigue going into the meet, and you crushed it.
Yeah, no, it did. It definitely got. What's that concept? Is that the light at the end of the tunnel, or is that a train coming at me, or is that the calm before the storm kind of thing? It's definitely the calm before the storm. I mean, it gets really, 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 really hard, and then all of a sudden it just kind of gets calm, and then you get to compete, and that's what it's about. So. The second thing we talked about, other than it prepares you to do the hard, is that it's good for goal setting. It allows you to create a timeline of purposeful goal setting and purposeful programming so that you can then start to break things up into what we would call blocks or microcycles, macro cycles. And that applies to all sport endeavors. Whether you're doing a marathon or whether you're doing a strength meet or a CrossFit event, you have to think about how far in advance is the event or the series of events, and where am I at presently? So it also gets you examining a sense of self-awareness and where you're at in your own training and where you need to be and what things you need to improve upon. And then you get some really good hardline goals that you can get written down and set up some timelines and work on that refining process along the way for goal setting.
Yeah, when we talked about the levels of training advancement in some of the early episodes, we defined a novice as someone who essentially sets a PR every single time they work out. But also, when we're looking at training and programming, we measure our progress by PRs.
Yeah.
Right? Whether
Yeah.
it's a 5-rep PR for doing sets, if you're lifting weights, whether it's a time PR on the rower, whatever it is, we look at PRs as a measure of have we made progress over our training cycle.
Sure.
Now, as we get more advanced, our training cycles get longer. We're not setting PRs every workout.
Right. Adaptation takes longer.
That's right. That adaptation takes longer. So at some point, you reach a level of advancement where you need the competition to test your PR and see, like, did I actually get better?
Yeah.
Right. And there's two elements to that. Number one is, did the programming work? And did I execute it well? That's one reason you would PR. And then the second one is that practice of actually taking what you've trained for, that adaptation you've gained in the gym, and translating it into a performance.
Yeah, and that brings us to those concepts like you're alluding to, the concepts of practice, competition, training, all those different components, and they're all different. They all are intertwined, but working out in the gym is definitely not the same as competing. Even though I can simulate competition in the gym, but that's not what I'm going to be doing leading up to the competition per se. If it's a strength meet, yeah, I'm doing 3 events usually. It's either the press, the squat, and the deadlift, or the bench press, the squat, and the deadlift, or it could be a strongman competition. And I'm doing those things in the gym, but I am definitely training.
Right.
I'm training. And then at some point, I might work towards a heavy single or a heavy double or something like that. And that becomes more competitive in its nature because now I'm trying to test what actually is going to happen on the competitive field.
Right. Yeah, powerlifting and strength lifting is a funny sport because the actual performance, the meet itself, is the same thing as the training.
Yeah.
Right? Which is usually not the case, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You don't necessarily train for baseball
Right.
by always throwing a baseball, right?
Right.
There's going to be some strength training, some conditioning in there. You're not always throwing a baseball just to prepare for baseball.
Right.
Of course, you're going to practice by throwing a baseball.
Right.
But that's not all of your training. Whereas training for a strength meet is pretty much all squatting, all pressing. Yeah, but nevertheless, there's still a skill component into taking the 5s that you've done, the sets of 5 that you've done, and translating that into a 1RM, a 1-rep single. And that's the important point here is that you actually have to do it. Right?
Yeah.
It's not enough to just have a calculator or to kind of hit some heavy triples or whatever and be like, well, I think my 1-rep max would be about this.
Yeah.
That's fine for programming, but I think there's value in actually performing that single.
Sure.
Because that's hard.
Well, just getting into that load and getting into that bar, if you've never done a heavy single in strength training, then you haven't really had that perception, that feeling of what it's like to have that crushing weight on you. And you need to experience that before the meet.
Yeah.
You need to experience that before to know where you stand on that. And I think, Trent, that's perfect. That's a perfect lead into our third area, which you talked about developing skill. And that is it refines your technique. In whatever sport you're in, it refines your technique. I know when I used to do triathlons, I was a weaker runner and swimmer. So I hired a swimming coach. And she was a coach at UT. She swam at UT, and then she was a coach at UT down in Austin. And then she was a coach at Carroll High School here up in South Lake Carroll area. And so I hired her, and I spent 4 or 5 sessions with her. And, whether I was going to become a competitive swimmer or not didn't matter. I refined my technique. That makes me healthier.
Yeah.
That can limit and prevent injury. It improved my shoulder stroke. It improved my chest position in the water for me to look down and not hold my head up. That gets less drag coefficient. I become a better swimmer. It improves my other 2 events in the tri. And then I also hired a running coach. And so, if nothing else, I was refining my technique to be a better athlete at whatever level I was going to achieve. And I'm not a great runner at all. I'm like I run like a rhino basically, but I'm a terrible runner. But it definitely helped my performance overall. And going through that process was also improving my health, my longevity in athleticism, my ability to do this longer and refine myself. The person that decides they're never going to hire a coach and they're never going to listen, they're never going to read a book, about their sport, and they're never going to maybe read an article about what they do or a blog or whatever else. That person, I don't want them as a trainee.
No.
I don't want them in my gym.
Well, you won't get them anyway. But,
right, exactly. But
but
that person doesn't want to improve, and there's a lot of value in improving, not just the direct things that we're talking about, but other less direct value.
Yeah. So there you go. I mean, you've kind of summed up the first point nicely, which is that having that competition gives you, that's the impetus for hiring experts to help you, right?
Sure.
And to really want to strive to improve. And that strive for improvement in the competition also impacts your training. It makes your training better, which will make your competition even better, right? So it all feeds into this nice feedback loop.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I mean, I'm a coach, and I'm a coach of coaches, and I'm also needing to be coached.
Yeah.
And so coaches, professional coaches, and artisans in their crafts recognize the value of the expert.
Absolutely.
And what I found in the street meet this last weekend basically was while I was there, I relied on a colleague and a friend of mine, Scott Hambrick, who was there coaching his wife. Actually, I said, "Hey, handle me a little bit here.
Yeah.
Help me make sure I don't do something stupid." And but it was great having his insight and his perspective. And when I went for the last lift on several of the lifts, I went back to him and I said, "Hey, what do you think? You saw the bar speed. I want your perspective." He said, "Go for it. You know, you can pull that. You know, you can do that." And relying on that coaching refines your technique. It refines your experience. It also develops, like we said, a higher level of self-awareness. And that's one thing I want to talk about now, because I want to talk about a couple things that we have to be careful of too before we finish the list of all the good things. A couple things we have to be careful of, though, in that self-awareness process is to be careful of comparison. We don't want you to compare yourselves to others, even though that is part of competition. That is a natural outflow of competition. You're going to be ranked against other people, but that doesn't establish your value. It might establish your ranking within that sport or that chosen endeavor, but it doesn't establish your personal value. Hopefully you move beyond that in your life at this age, but most of us haven't. But hopefully we can grow through that and recognize, and you said it earlier, Trent, we are preparing to be our best self first.
Yeah.
And then we're competing and comparing ourselves to others within that sport.
Absolutely.
But first, be our best self.
Yeah, I've got something I'm going to link in the show notes. Very cool story. So there were 5 U.S. Strength Lifting Federation meets that were held this past weekend. So Darren lifted in the Tempe meet, but up in Maryland at the Westminster meet, there was a young man. I think he's young guy, 23, 24. His name is Miles, and there's a video that I'm going to link for you. This guy has cerebral palsy, and he's been training for months, working incredibly hard to be able to perform the lifts and compete at that strength meet.
It's awesome.
And
it's totally awesome.
I mean, I'm like, who's cutting onions in here? Watch that videos. It's incredible.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Awesome. So I really encourage you to watch that video and just, think like Miles is never going to win his weight class. He's never going to win the overall at that meet, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whatsoever. He won.
Yeah,
he
became better as himself.
That's right.
He became better as himself.
Absolutely. And that's what it's all about. We strive for excellence. And that can be a little tough in Western culture, and especially in American culture. We value winners of a sport.
Sure.
And we value sports that declare winners.
Right.
We prioritize sports.
Yeah, who wants 21st places? Everyone won first place today. Hey, everybody get right.
Exactly. So. And I certainly understand the sentiment, right? We don't need to be congratulatory for
not everyone gets a trophy.
Not everybody gets a trophy, but at the same time there is lots of value in striving for excellence for yourself, right? Whatever that is.
Yeah, the value of sport is how it changes us inside, and how it makes us better human beings, how it makes us better us's. And from there, then there's the opportunity to compete against your fellow man or woman. But the first thing is improving of self.
Yeah.
But you are not. I used to tell my members of my CrossFit gym, you are not your last time in your workout, your last Fran time, your last Helen time, your last CrossFit Total, whatever. You're not your best weight, your best time, your best speed, your best pace. That's not who you are. That's just something you do. But we want to be good at doing if that's what you want to do. And so, but that's not who you are. The second thing I think that I used to tell, this was especially true in my CrossFit gyms that I used to own, was I used to tell them, have a right perspective. If you're a banker and on Monday morning you have to go in and see clients and you compete in a CrossFit competition over the weekend and you take it so seriously that on Monday it affects your performance as a banker, and you're not happy, and you're not positive with your clients, and you're not excited about being at work or whatever it is, and you think that I used to tell my guys, winning a plastic trophy, standing on a wood box in some rat hole sweaty gym somewhere with a bag of coupons, as the prize money.
Yeah.
And I'm not knocking CrossFit competitions. I'm just saying keep a right perspective. I didn't win anything this last weekend. What I won was the opportunity to be a better me.
Yeah.
That's what I won, was the opportunity to be a better me. Now, do I want to win as a master's lifter in the USSF? Yes, I want to crush everyone around me.
Yeah.
But that's an outflowing of me being better. I'm a better person by competing. Trent's a better person by competing. We all are. But we want to keep a right perspective. None of us are doing this professionally right now, and so none of us make a living. So we can't trash our bodies so much, too. If you're a FedEx deliverer and you're going to go out and deliver packages on Monday morning, remember that when you're competing on Saturday, or Sunday. Yeah. You have a life outside this, and you can't risk the ability to earn a wage or do other things that are actually more important.
Right.
So I think that's important. Keep a balance. Don't let it consume your life. Maintain a balance. If you're competing in a sport and you're giving up too much family time and you're not a professional at doing this, you're not trying to support your family in doing this, and there's not a bigger goal, overreaching goal, then I would say, hey, remember, you have a family too.
Yeah.
That's one thing I found in training endurance athletes that were really serious endurance athletes that were 3-sport athletes, triathletes, was that you'd have 100 hours of training a week. Your family is just most athletes it just sucked the very life out of them. So they really weren't that happy after all. And so those are two things we just want to make our listening audience aware of, because we've experienced those things too. Number one, be careful about comparing yourself to others, and number two, keep a right perspective. Back to the good stuff though.
Yeah.
Number 4 would be that competing improves our habits, our consistency. It also can influence and overflow into other areas of training and lifestyle to where we start to improve in other areas of our life. Like we might dial in our nutrition or our sleep habits, or we might develop better stress relief methods where we're relieving stress and things like that. So.
Yeah, this is a favorite phrase of mine. I think it's called the hedonic treadmill. At our core, right? We're pleasure seekers as animals.
Sure.
In the world, and what we have is we have our faculties of reason that can override that pleasure seeking urge, and help us make choices like, you know what, I'm not gonna eat that.
Sure.
6-pack of donuts this morning because
denial of self.
Right. Yeah. And that's that delayed gratification, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, sometimes that
not very good of it in the Western culture.
not so good. Not so good. But you and I and the 40 Fit Nation are trying to change that. Right?
Yeah.
We're trying to be shining examples.
Yeah.
But sometimes that carrot of competition that helps you make the good choices. From day to day. And what's interesting about the concept of pleasure seeking is that it works both ways, right? The more that you pleasure seek, the easier and the more you want to do it, right? So the more you give in to that urge, the easier it is to do it the next time. But it also works in reverse. The more you learn how to control that impulse, the easier it is the next time, and then those choices accumulate. So again, I find this is very true with my own nutrition, because I eat reasonably clean, but not overly
Sure,
so.
sure.
Right. I eat just good enough to kind of support my training.
Right.
But when there's a competition on the line, because
Yeah.
nutrition is just not something I'm particularly interested in.
Right.
Right. But when there's a competition,
You'll
on the
dial
line,
it in.
I'll dial it in.
Yeah.
I'll dial it in, and I'll find myself, you know what? I don't really need that
Yeah.
glass of whiskey tonight.
Yeah,
I just don't need it.
No, and it's a great point. I mean, 2.5, almost 3 weeks, 2.5 weeks in front of the competition, I decided to abstain from all alcohol for that period of time just to see how it would influence my tapering and my final training prior to the competition. And I think it was a huge help, and those are things that we just need to do. Sometimes we just need to do those things for denial of self. Humans that deny themselves constantly all the time on everything are very unhappy and usually crater. So it's about moderation. It's about developing a mindset of moderation and learning how to develop some self-discipline. And I think that brings us to the fifth point, and that is the value of competition is it makes us better overall. It makes us better overall. Even if we lose at the end of the day, if you have never competed and you get last place, you're better overall.
Yeah.
It makes you a better person. It refines you. It improves your goal setting. It helps you do the hard. It improves technique and form in your event. It improves consistency. It overflows into other habits of life, and it helps us maintain a better balance in our life. When I'm on my game and I'm competing, and I walk into the office to treat a patient, I'm a better PT. I'm better at what I do because I feel good about myself too, and not in a shallow way. I feel good because I know I'm doing the work. Whether I performed at my best or not, I can still learn something. I mean, I used to tell my girls when they were growing up all the time, you learn more from your losses than you do from your wins.
Absolutely.
The losses really, they shape you, they mold you, and if you become better and not bitter, then you're a better person overall. So
that's right.
I think that's the big value of competition.
And I think part of why that happens is, in my experience, when you go to these competitions, whatever it is, I've done triathlons, I've done the strength meets, lots of sports growing up. Almost always in those communities, people are incredibly supportive because everyone knows that the level of effort given, regardless of how well you perform, everybody knows that everyone else is trying as hard as they can.
Yeah.
And being around that, being in that environment where everybody's striving to be better, is really uplifting. It raises the level of everyone. And that's, I always say that to people, trying to become better musicians.
Right.
How do I do it? Well, it's like at some point you got to get out of the bedroom and you've got to go play with people who are better than you.
Yeah.
And nothing else will elevate your playing other than being around people who are better.
Yeah.
And the point is not to get to their level because you might not. Again, you may not be the professional that plays 6 gigs a week.
Right.
You might be a weekend warrior, and that's okay. But putting yourself in an environment where everyone is elevating each other because of the level of effort being given, and watching people who are more advanced than you that have walked further down the path, soaking up the wisdom from them, and then encouraging the people who are further behind than you, right? And showing them the way. I think that environment is a huge social
well, a rising tide raises all boats.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
And I think you're speaking to something we really didn't even talk about here, and that is the community and what competition brings and relationships. I mean, we had a blast this weekend hanging out with Charity and Scott and Nikki and Bob Santana and all these different guys and different lifters that we've never met from all over the country.
Yeah.
And just getting to know them and their struggles and their victories and watching them compete and seeing them overcome things and all different levels of competition. No one cares. No one cares that you're lifting, if you're a male lifter and you're lifting 135-pound deadlift, and that's the best you can do, and you give it all you've got, your effort looks just as valid as the guy that's lifting 500.
Everybody claps just as hard.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, it's all about those relationships too. And so, well, man, thanks for joining us here on the 40 Fit Nation today, and thanks for joining us on this podcast. And this is the end of our podcast. And if you want to reach out to us, you can find us on Facebook at the 40 Fit Masters Community Group. You can also find us on Instagram at 40 Fit Radio. My Instagram is at DL Deaton. Trent's Instagram is at Marmalade Cream.
That's right.
And you can find us on 40fit.com, and you can reach out to us there and get more information about what we're doing. and how we're trying to support the 40 Fit Nation.
Now, guys, I hope that we have inspired you to go out, sign up for the next competition. Find something you're doing now, whether it's a strength meet or a triathlon or 5K or whatever. And here's the most important thing. Go mail the check.
Yeah.
Sign up right now. Mail the check.
Do it
put it
before
on the
you
calendar.
change your mind.
That's right. And then, you'll be a better person on the other end. Well, thanks for joining us, guys. We'll see you next week.
See you on the other side.